Good morning, Wabash. Today, speaking at the Pioneer Chapel is alumnus Adam Phipps from the class of 2011 with his talk titled Son, Brother, Husband, Father. Adam Phipps was a Wabash graduate of the class of 2011. He grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, and attended high school at Nolan Catholic. He first heard about this strange all-male college in the middle of Indiana from his wacky Latin teacher, Peter Pachter, from the class of 65. Adam rebuffed Mr. Pachter's public humor, rubber cockroaches, and persistent reminders to apply to Wabash for 3 years, anticipating an aerospace engineering degree at some other, less prestigious school. He was finally convinced to join the Wabash Brotherhood and arrived in 2007, proving to be the best decision of his life. After a few years living in Austin post-grad, including 2 seasons broadcasting with the NBA, Adam returned to join the Wabash staff in 2015. His various titles have included Media Services Specialist, Videographer, and Digital Content Editor. He is currently the website editor and finally earned that desired career title of Engineer, as in Broadcast Engineer. He is married to his wife, Julia Rose, herself devoted to the success of Wabash as a fellow staff member, and is a very proud and rather sleep-deprived new father to their son, Isaac James.
Good morning, Wabash. Before I begin, I would like to thank first the Sphinx Club for inviting me to speak today, and for all of you who have come out today to listen. I also thank my Wabash mentors and friends for listening to a variety of starts and stops on my way to today's speech, and for their revisions and advice. Lastly, I thank my newborn son, Isaac, and my wife, Julia, who could not be here today, for granting me the personal space and time to write this talk during these precious first days of our parentage. I have been given so much love and grace that I do not deserve, and for that, I thank God himself. The chapel talk is a tradition deeply sacred and necessary to Wabash's continued exchange of free thought and ideas, and it is an honor to serve as today's speaker. The title of my talk today centers around some fundamental male relationships that constitute the largest parts of what makes me who I am: son, brother, husband, father. I'll talk about how I've embodied these relationships and how they have been embodied in me throughout my life. But I hope to make the case also that these terms deserve recognition, deserve to be raised up and validated. It may strike you as strange that I would find it worthwhile to describe such widely held, deeply felt universal experiences of man in today's talk, at an all-male college of all places. Aren't these relationships self-evident to every man? Are they not so apparent to all you students as to already be known? Perhaps. These relationships exist, after all, regardless of our individual choices, outside of and applied to our very selves, whether asked for or not. But you don't have to look very hard to find in our culture an affirmation of the self that is completely sourced from within, completely absent from these fundamental relational ones. For the best examples from our culture, I will, of course, pull from a couple of superhero films. "You are who you choose to be," claims the Green Goblin from the still good 2002 Spider-Man film. "You know you like it deep down inside, so quit fighting it." "It's not the man I am underneath, but what I do that defines me," says a gravelly-voiced Christian Bale Batman in the excellent Christopher Nolan film Batman Begins. These statements by supermen present a relatively recent Western tradition of the self-made man, actualized in the grandest and noblest ways by heroes capable of things far greater than any of us could attain in reality. We place at the center of our imaginary heroes the sovereign right to individual self-determination without a second thought. No surprise, given how many centuries the modern world has incubated this as the ideal man. It is for this reason that my talk today will emphasize the enormous impact these relational identities of son, brother, husband, and father have had on me as a way to argue for their sovereign place before self-determination across all of human nature, the universal experience of all mankind. I was born in Arlington, Texas on July 13th, 1988, The firstborn son to Brian and Mary Ann Phipps, mom and dad, two middle-class Catholics well into their fourth year of marriage. They grew up together in the suburbs of Sioux City, Iowa, born into stable families themselves. Relatives from both sides visited and supported them through the first few months of my life, even at such a great distance. Per Catholic practice and tradition, they had me baptized within a couple months, welcoming me into another family, Christ's universal body, the Roman Catholic Church. This act, more than any other, prefigured what would prove to be a life overabundant with nurturing and faithful love, largely due to their unreserved stewardship. As the first son, I always strived mightily to please mom and dad. I followed all the rules. Okay, most of the rules. I never lied. Okay, except for that one time with the tree. And the one time I did steal a toy from a friend's house, I broke down in tears out of shame and spilled the beans. Lucky for me, grades in school came easy. I didn't have to work hard to stay out of trouble on that front. Sports was another story. Dad wanted me to play baseball like him, but I wanted to be a Power Ranger instead. So I took taekwondo lessons. I found other ways to connect, though. Dad sold Amway products for a long time growing up, a peer-to-peer, multi-level marketing company selling off-market brands. When he would come home demoralized from another rejection, I would tell him how much I believed in him. That desire to comfort my parents in times of hardship was also a hallmark of my sonship to them. I can remember one time when I found Mom crying in her bed. I didn't know the details. I didn't know the specifics of why she was crying, but I could tell it had something to do with grief. Without having any reason to know how this could be true, I walked up to her, climbed up into her lap, and hugged her, saying, "Everything is going to be okay, Mom." In any case, the times that I attempted to care for them were really just droplets in the ocean. Dad taught me self-reliance and financial prudence, even in the little things, like how to make the same turkey sandwich lunch to take to school and work every day, and how to enjoy it. He taught me to do my chores as a duty to the household, an obligation to be fulfilled without pay, and only paid me in cash for mowing the entire half-acre backyard. He loved me like only a father can love a son, with kind words, thoughtful reflections, stern authority when warranted, and always an affectionate good night. Mom, well, you guys know, she's my mom. She cooked my meals, cleaned the house, washed and folded my laundry, watched soap operas with me, Price is Right, too, although I didn't care for the soaps. As a new father, I am only just beginning to scratch the surface of how much they sacrificed for me. And to be completely honest, I'm kind of terrified I won't match up to their brilliant and selfless work. Of course, I'm not the only one for whom Mom and Dad sacrificed. My first brother Joshua was born a few years after me in 91, and my other brother Zachary followed in 93. I cannot remember a time when Josh, Zach, and I were not together. We went everywhere together, did everything together, and when we regrouped after school, we would quickly ignore everything and everyone else. We even shared the same bedroom. So much room for activities, guys. And activities we had, usually after sundown, Mom and Dad would stagger our bedtime so that Zach and Josh would be in the room sleeping for at least an hour before putting me to bed. Unfortunately, this did nothing to stop Josh and Zach from immediately waking up when I arrived so that we could play our nightly games, including saying bad words we weren't normally allowed to say and laughing quietly, jumping up and down on each other in the large queen bed under the bunk, sneaking down the hallway as far as possible before getting caught, skulking back into the room guiltily under Dad's gaze when we were caught, pillow fights, blanket fights, mattress fights, and finally, the Adam Show, which involved beaming a flashlight on various objects around the bedroom and announcing them boisterously as though actual people welcomed onto a late-night talk show. Stuffed animals, posters, pillows, glasses of water, the carpet, the wall. And that was just what we did at night. Together, much like the characters from Bill Watterson's quintessential comic Calvin and Hobbes, we've spun worlds, entire worlds, out of our boredom. Yes, we were weird, but we were weird together, and we loved each other for it. In that brotherly bond, that fraternity, that fire, we forged a deep and abiding love for each other. Not to say it wasn't without its low points, the once-in-a-while shoving, the bites on the chest. Still remember that one, Josh? The fistfights and the tears. But these flare-ups held not a candle to the constant radiant energy that we shared and still share today. And then my sister was born. Sarah came along when I was already 11 years old. Now I was a brother to a youngest sister, not just the head of a semi-cultic cadre of 3. I would like to say that this didn't alter my relationship with my brothers, but that wouldn't really be honest. For the most part, Josh, Zach, and I remained committed to our games and good times. But now we had someone else to include, and a girl nonetheless. As I grew into my teenage years, I realized that I had to make a new space for Sarah in our sibling group, whether I wanted to or not. I'd like to think that I did the best I could, but to be honest, my brother-sister relationship was all too new to me. I didn't really know what to do with her back then. By the time I left to attend Wabash, a school 800 miles away from the family, Sarah and I remained loving siblings, but distanced by our difference in age, now multiplied by space. In many ways, Josh and Zach understand her far better than I. Though I am happy to report that today, I continue to learn how better to provide her advice and protection as her eldest brother, on her terms. Much more work remains to be done to foster a stronger relationship together, but even still, Sarah and I remain very close, and I love her just the same as I do my brothers. Of course, all of you students know today what came next for me, a Wabash education, one largely shaped by the context of the brothers with whom you are surrounded, and the same was true for me in the fraternity of Tau Kappa Epsilon. Now, here were some men I could get along with. The men of Teak insisted on hosting a Magic the Gathering card game night the first night of Rush when I entered the doors during the spring event, and the rest is history. That bold, unerring commitment to their interests, naysayers be damned, caught hold of my heart right away and bound me to this new family away from home for my 4 years here. My brothers could have just lived under the same roof as me, but they didn't. They could have chosen to ignore that bond that was made manifest at our initiation. Instead, they committed to the fraternal brotherhood under which we all became united, a relationship requiring their sacrifice of comforts and lifestyles they otherwise would have preferred, independent of this zany, weird house of misfits. I had my share of sacrifice. Living among our atrocious housekeeping habits was one of those. Wrapping up a brother's injury when I should have been wrapping up an essay. Tolerating at 2 a.m. yet another false fire alarm, triggered by an errant hallway mattress fight of all things. In other words, we took our fraternal bond at Teak seriously. One committed to love, charity, and esteem. And for that, I love those brothers to this day. Somehow, amidst this rowdy, raucous band of hooligans, I reconnected with an old family friend back home in Texas, also in college, Julia Rose Poole. Guys, I can't emphasize enough how providential it was to find an old friend with whom I suddenly and unexpectedly became so infatuated. You see, I first met Julia when I was 6 years old. Both our parents were connected via Amway, that same multi-level marketing organization popular among mom and dad's Christian circles. Through this sales network, this daughter of another business family entered into my life. And I didn't really care. I mean, come on, my brothers and I had much grander plans, entire worlds to manage. Besides, Julia and I didn't have much in common. She homeschooled, me private Catholic school, she in theater, me a science and math engineer type. Some of our only memories together in childhood involve playing Legos and elevator tag, which all of the business kids played together in hotels out of state during semi-annual business conferences. At the time, I was completely oblivious, really all throughout my childhood, that she would one day become my most trusted partner, my closest friend, my faithful, faith-filled, and beautiful wife. Early in our sophomore college year, Julia and I went on our first date. We dated long distance, including a 4-month stint with me out of the country, graduated college the same year, and moved back to Texas to be together. Throughout our courtship, we both knew the other longed for marriage and children as the purpose and natural consummation of our deep and committed love for one another. And so on January 5th, 2013, we were married, and at that moment became husband and wife. I'm guessing most of you men are not yet privileged to be called a husband, but let me tell you something. It is so much more than felt love. It is a love well lived, one that demands more than meeting emotional needs, one requiring daily and active sacrifice. Before I was her husband, I was only Julia's confidant, her close friend. I am still that today as her husband, but much more is required of me now. Patience with her faults, listening to her needs, admitting my own faults freely, bridling my tongue. I don't always get this right. There are times when I don't want to get it right, when I stop choosing to do so. Those are the hard times. Choosing to do a good job as husband and wife is how we store up our love. But even when I don't choose to do so, the duty is still there, still expected of me. Being a husband is a part of who I am now, exactly because Julia is my wife. Nothing will change that until death do us part. It is here that the final term, that of father, should make its appearance. Julia and I left ourselves open to children throughout our marriage. She has always known that she wants to be a mother, and I have always known that I would be a father. Despite our wants, our desires to have children, however, that would not happen right away. A combination of health factors contributed to a great difficulty and low chance that we would ever conceive children of our own. For years, we sought doctors, procedures, treatments, and approaches that might raise those chances, but by all accounts, modern medicine could not provide us with a solution. Around this time, we moved to Crawfordsville, and within 2 months of buying our first house here, a Department of Child Services representative attended our church and laid down some pretty harsh numbers regarding foster care. Crawfordsville's Montgomery County alone averages around 170 cases in the foster system at any one time. Each case represents one child, mind you. Yet the county only boasts about 10 licensed foster homes, leaving the majority of the burden to fall in part on extended family members. In many cases, no such fit family member can be found for these children, leading to long-distance moves for the children to Indianapolis for placement in other foster families or in group homes run by the state, entire households of multiple children from broken families. The outcomes for such children are what you might expect: abysmal. Many end up becoming abusers themselves of substance or persons, whichever is familiar, perpetuating the cycle of intergenerational trauma that they receive as their familial inheritance, an inheritance they never asked for, a family they didn't choose. In light of these realities existing right next door to us, right down the street, less than a mile from our new house, we elected to become foster parents. And in late 2019, Julia and I accepted a 12-year-old boy into our home. For nearly a year, we fit this young man into our loving family, providing him structure, discipline, and guidance completely foreign to his experience of childhood up to this point. We emphasized the primacy of respect for one another in the home, enduring his reactionary fits in response. In the hardest moments, my devotion to fatherhood waned when I watched him break his own hand in a full-throated rage, when he screamed how much he hated us, and perhaps most of all, when he completely ignored our presence in his life for most of his waking hours during the summer of 2020, during COVID-19. There were, of course, bright days in between the stormy seas. Teaching him how to volley shot a soccer ball was one of them. Playing catch in the field behind our house, his laughter and his delight. But most of our work was just that, sacrificial work that would require years of love to reverse a trend of neglect and abuse. I cannot say what fortunes, good and bad, I felt more poignantly on the day he was removed from our home, reunited with his biological father. The pain and the tears as his absence made itself known at the exact moment that their car shifted into reverse out of our driveway. It felt like a patch sewn over my heart was being methodically and constantly ripped out of me. The deepest recognition throughout our time together, one that was not only necessary and healthy, but also true, was the fact that I was indeed not by nature his father. Fostering children means provision of safety and security, health and home, labor and love. All aspects, too, of fathering and mothering one's own children. The difference is that foster relationships are only made out of what each of you put in, only. You are not otherwise, outside of compulsion of the state, fundamentally related. And often the children are not willing or able to fulfill that relationship, to put forth much to strengthen the feeble bond. Please don't misunderstand me. I do not discount the service and dedication of those parents who, like Julia and I, chose foster care in light of a familial life without children of our own. That is the tragedy of the foster family. It is only chosen, not itself inherent. In other words, it is unnatural. It is not of nature. So the dedication of any adult to any such child is a daily sacrifice worthy of all of our support, respect, and honor. A year ago, I did not feel this way. I wouldn't have understood foster fatherhood as any different than that of biological fatherhood. As I've already stated, its nature as a relationship chosen is what makes it so laudable, so noble, so necessary for all of our kids. But then, Julia and I, completely out of the blue, conceived our son, Isaac James. As mentioned in the introduction, he is newly born, February 6, 2021, less than 2 weeks old. I would describe for you what this new experience of fatherhood means to me, but I literally haven't the words. In between the restless nights and the bleary days of crying, diaper changes, feedings, and burpings, I see in him a far wider world than I ever could have created. A whole universe of love and devotion that is too vast for me to verbalize right now. I can already tell that we share an unbreakable bond, already formed by nature of his sonship to me and my fatherhood to him. And I can't wait to lean on the experience of my own father as my love for Isaac grows stronger each day and each diaper into his future. Having shared these very personal experiences as a son, brother, husband, and father, I hope that you recognize how much they have shaped the whole of my identity, what makes me, me. They are foundational to who I am. They come before my self-identity by nature and not by choice, necessarily familial and uniquely male. It is the truth to recognize such relationships as universally known by every human person on some level, and therefore it is true that they are equally foundational to each one of you sons and brothers of Wabash, sons of your mother and father first, brothers to your own siblings where applied, perhaps already yourselves husbands and fathers. And that recognition of their primacy matters today. It especially matters right now, given our current moment in American culture. One of the first bills introduced by our United States 117th House of Representatives, the current House, was H.R. 8, a standard resolution revising the rubric of rules and procedures by which the new Congress would hear and vote upon new bills. One of the revisions made in this resolution modernizes the use of pronouns, familial relationship terminology, and other references to gender in order to consider a bill as admissible to the House. The particular language of the bill states the following, and I quote, "Strike father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, nephew, niece, husband, wife, father-in-law, mother-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, stepfather, stepmother, stepson, stepdaughter, stepbrother, stepsister, half-brother, half-sister, grandson, or granddaughter, and insert parent, child, sibling, parents, sibling, siblings, child, spouse, parent-in-law, child-in-law, sibling-in-law, step-parent, step-child, step-sibling, half-sibling, or grandchild, end quote. Now, the purposes for using such gender-neutral language is inclusivity, to be mindful of all members of the house and their families. And inclusion is a worthy goal, one deserving of our consideration in treating others with respect. But I can't help but notice that the use of such language as a replacement falls short of the universal human experience of family and relational identity. Parent does not fully capture the meaning of father. It not only leaves something out, but it implies that mother means much the same thing to father. Brother and sister are fundamentally different from one another, much as my relationship with Josh and Zach is fundamentally different from my relationship with Sarah. Sibling simply does not accurately account for these differences. It is no surprise that this language is quickly becoming the standard of our public discourse today. It has been nearly 30 years since a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court confirmed in a plurality opinion the idea that, quote, at the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning, of the universe, and of the mystery of human life, end quote. Changing the language used is a step toward redefining the meanings and purposes by which we, each one of us, self-identify. In removing gender-specific language, we remove another impediment to the sovereign right to self-expression, namely relational familial definitions of our identity. Identity is applied to us rather than by us. This subservience to the family to the individuals that make it up has been observed by sociologist Zygmunt Bauman. Bauman coins the concept liquid modernity, noting as unique to our current culture of high social mobility the prevalence of until further notice relationships, or those defined primarily by the choice of the individual. This idea is practically unavoidable in today's culture, ranging from the wide acceptance of the legal practice of no-fault divorce, defining marriage as primarily an arrangement between two individuals, only until one or the other or both decide otherwise, to the widespread observance of at-will employment practices, and even to the increasing rise of spiritual individuals who refrain from identifying with any particular religion. Bauman notes that this has already affected a shift in perspective as to how we value the function and importance of the family. No longer must the individuals of a family support the unit as a whole, including an observance of the family's religious and moral practices. Instead, the family unit is expected to provide for the individual needs of each person composing it. This vast amount of freedom for the individual does not come without a number of dooming consequences, and we can know that because those consequences are readily apparent and witnessable within the same families whose children have fallen into the foster care system. Sociological and census data between the years of 1960 and 2010 indisputably showcase the decline of stable marriages involving both the mother and the father within the same home among the bottom 30% of socioeconomic and educational class. These same Americans experienced over this 50-year period a similar vast decline in their retainment of stable jobs and income, as well as a severe decline in commitment to religiosity or particular church attendance, and to add one final point as well, a decline in the overall educational attainment of their children and their children. In his 2012 book, Coming Apart, Charles Murray frames these declines as indicators of the unsustainability of what we might call a uniquely American culture. I hope that such cultural upheaval does not necessarily follow from so comprehensive and widespread a decline in societal indicators among the less fortunate. It is, in fact, hard for me to comprehend, and I imagine for most of you, that possibility, given that I myself am a member of the financial and educational class who reads Charles Murray and Zygmunt Bauman in the first place. My only exposure to such instability and cultural decline has been in witness to my foster son, a victim not only of abuse and neglect, but of the environment of broken families, lost religion, and jobless poverty that is sustained by a lack of support for these very familial identities themselves in our own social safety net. Perhaps you can now see why I chose to speak about this today. And in closing, I'd like to leave you with a few personal observations about what defines the internal familial relationships that support my external self-identity. First off, being a son, a brother, a husband, and a father are uniquely and by definition male, and only male. The bond of brotherhood is no more important than that of sisterhood, don't get me wrong. They are both equally valid, but they are different. Brotherhood is unique in its form as reckless, aggressive, and objectively physical. Our bond as brothers grows strongest in adversity, sometimes even stronger when suffered at our own hands. If you've ever gotten into a physical or vociferous verbal fight with one of your own fellow Wabash men, you know what I'm talking about. I had a number of these battles with certain pledge brothers, and those battles formed strong enough bonds upon our reconciliation for them to become the groomsmen at my wedding. Second, these identities are themselves definable in relation to each other within the family unit. You become a father at the moment of your child's conception. And the DNA making up the other half of that child comes from the woman who becomes the child's mother. As a mother and father, you each have your own unique ways of raising your child, themselves influenced by your familial relationships as sons and daughters of your own parents. Again, unique to the gender. Fatherhood deserves not only its own place apart from motherhood, but a favorable one too. Our own Dr. Olafson's body of psychological research largely makes a case for the unique role of fatherhood. If you have yet to consider taking his fatherhood course, I highly encourage you to do so before graduating. Finally, I cannot emphasize enough just how primary these relationships are to our very nature, absent our choices. I did not choose to be the son of Brian and Mary Ann Phipps. Did not choose to be Joshua, Zachary, and Sarah's brother. I did choose to marry Julia, but I wasn't her husband until our wedding day, and it was also reliant on a choice of her own. I did choose to serve as a foster father, but I did not choose the foster son that was placed into our loving home, and he did not choose me. In much the same way, I became a biological father at the moment of Isaac's conception, a moment that occurred outside of our desired time frame. In other words, how well we serve our loved ones on the other side of these roles, how fully we embody the relationship for someone else, that is up to us. That is our choice in the end. But the titles, the realities of son, brother, husband, and father, these relationships, they exist, whether we acknowledge them or not, whether we make them a part of our self-expression or not. Rather, they define for us a fundamental and foundational grounding of our identity. And this is not a bad thing, given what we see when someone is not granted those familial securities. Being a son, a brother, a husband, a father, their existence is inherent to family life. Their meaning is everywhere known, universal in experience, by nature, mysterious, and human. In other words, we are not at liberty to redefine these terms, and we do so at the peril of our own nation and our own selves. Wabash men, you have your hopes and aspirations to become the man you choose to be. Don't get me wrong, that is a good, an invaluable good that you have the privilege to receive at this uniquely liberal arts college and its all-male familial environment. It is your life to live, one for which you alone are responsible to guide and chart throughout history. Your choices define your life, what it is on the outside. But never forget the foundations of who brought you here first, of who makes you who you are prior to your own choices. Your mother, your father, your sonship to them, your sonship to God, your brothers and sisters, your wives or husbands, your fatherland, your Father in heaven. None of you have lived my life, but we remain connected as loyal sons into these classic halls, brothers forged in the fires of Wabash, forever after college days have passed, as long as life shall last. That is one relationship I'll cherish to the grave, and I welcome however many more of you I have the fortune of meeting and living alongside that life more fully, sitting as the shadows flit, praising her in song and story. Thank you.
A few quick announcements before we head out. Saturday, Wabash's tennis team hosts Manchester, and our basketball team travels to Worcester to take on the Fighting Scots. Lastly, tonight at 7:30, the MXI will be hosting a virtual trivia night. You can register to sign up from Jonathan Coleman's email he sent out earlier, and then he will send out one later today as well. Let's please rise and sing Old Wabash. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. From the hills of Maine to the western plain